The hospital smelled of bleach and expensive mistakes. In the center of the trauma bay, a boy lay shivering. He was 8 years old, but in that moment he looked like a broken doll. He was covered in thick black Georgia mud. It was in his hair, under his fingernails, and smeared across his pale, blue-tinged face. He couldn't breathe. Every gasp sounded like dry leaves scraping against pavement. Now, before I tell you what happened when those doors slammed shut, check that subscribe button. If you love stories where the arrogant are brought to their knees and the humble prove their worth, hit it right now and turn on notifications. Because the payback in this story, it isn't just a lesson. It's a total collapse of everything Dr. Sterling thought he knew. Beside him stood his father, Elias. Elias wasn't wearing a suit. He wasn't wearing a gold watch. He was wearing an old hoodie with a torn pocket and work boots that had seen better decades. To any passerby in Buckhead, he looked like a man who struggled to pay his electric bill. But Elias wasn't looking at his clothes. He was looking at Dr. Julian Sterling. Sterling was the kind of doctor who appeared on billboards. His teeth were too white, his hair was too perfect, and his bedside manner was non-existent if you didn't have a platinum Amex. He stood 6 feet away from the gurney, his nose wrinkled in disgust. He wouldn't even touch the boy. "Get him out," Sterling said. His voice was cold like a winter morning in the mountains. "This is a private high-tier emergency suite. We have senators coming in here. We have CEOs. We don't have whatever this is." "He's my son," Elias whispered. His voice was thick with a terror only a parent can know. "He's dying. Please, just the oxygen mask. Just 1 minute." Sterling didn't move. He adjusted his silk tie and looked at his $20,000 Patek Philippe watch. "You have 1 minute to get this dirty boy off my floor before I have security throw you both into the street. There's a free clinic 6 miles. Try your luck there. Maybe they won't mind the smell." Elias looked at his son, then back at the doctor. The fear in his eyes began to harden. It turned into something else. Something dangerous. He leaned in, his mud-stained face inches from the doctor's pristine skin. "You're making a mistake," Elias said. "A legendary mistake." Sterling just laughed. He waved his hand to the security guards. "Take the trash out. Welcome to the channel. We tell the stories the world tries to ignore. We believe that a man's character is found in how he treats those who can do nothing for him. Today we're going to show you what happens when a billionaire in rags meets a beggar in a suit. If you've ever been judged because of how you look, leave a like on this video. Let's show the world that we are more than our clothes. And stay with me, because at the 20-minute mark, a phone call is made that changes the medical world of Atlanta forever. Now let's take you back to where it all began. Tuesday morning. A quiet house. In southwest Atlanta. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday. Not a gold-embossed envelope, but a simple email. Subject: Board of Directors Annual Audit. Elias Thorne deleted the email without opening it. He didn't need an audit to tell him how his business was doing. He owned the building. He owned the land. He owned the very air the doctors breathed. But Elias didn't live like a king. He lived in a modest 3-bedroom house in a neighborhood where people still waved to each other. He drove a 2012 Ford F-150. Why? Because Elias Thorne grew up with nothing. His mother had been a janitor at the very hospital he now owned. He remembered the way doctors used to walk past her like she was part of the furniture. He remembered the way she'd come home with cracked hands and a tired smile telling him, "Elias, stay humble. Money attracts masks, but the dirt tells you the truth about a man." Elias took those words to heart. He raised his son Leo the same way. "Dad, look." Leo shouted. It was Saturday morning. The sun was beating down on their backyard. Leo was knee-deep in a muddy trench. Their neighbor, Mr. Miller, was 85 years old and lived alone. His backyard drainage pipe had burst and the old man was distraught. Without a word, Elias and Leo had grabbed shovels. "Good job, Leo," Elias said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Almost there. More bucket of mud and Mr. Miller won't have a swamp for a backyard." Leo was a ball of energy, a carbon copy of his father. He didn't care about video games or designer sneakers. He wanted to be in the dirt, helping. As Leo lifted a heavy clump of wet clay, he stopped. His shovel hit the ground with a dull thud. Dad. Leo's voice was small. Thin. Elias looked up. His heart stopped. Leo was clutching his chest. His face, usually flushed with life, was turning a terrifying shade of gray-blue. Leo. Breathe, son. Breathe. Elias dropped his shovel and scrambled into the trench. He pulled Leo into his arms. He knew exactly what was happening. Leo had an undiagnosed respiratory condition, something the doctors had been monitoring, but it had never been this bad. The exertion, the humidity, the dust from the clay. It was a perfect storm. Leo's lungs were seizing. He was suffocating in the open air. Hold on, Leo. Just hold on. Elias didn't waste time calling 911. He knew the ambulance response times in this part of town on a Saturday. He scooped his mud-covered son into his arms, ran to his old truck and roared out of the driveway. He headed for the one place he knew had the best pediatric pulmonary unit in the state, the Thorne Medical Center. It was his flagship. He had spent $200 million on the wing alone. He had hired the best doctors in the world. He thought he had built a sanctuary. He pulled into the emergency bay, tires screeching. He didn't care about the no parking signs. He didn't care that he was covered in grime and his truck looked like it belonged in a scrapyard. He burst through the double glass doors. I need help. Elias roared. The lobby was quiet, filled with the smell of expensive lilies and floor wax. My son isn't breathing. I need a pediatric crash cart now. The woman at the front desk, a woman named Beverly who wore glasses on a chain, looked up. She didn't see a father in pain. She saw a man in a muddy hoodie. Saw the mud dripping onto the white Italian marble. Sir, you need to calm down, Beverly said, her voice dripping with condescension. This is a private emergency department. Do you have a referral? Do you have your insurance card? He's 8 years old and he's blue. Elias slammed his hand on the desk. Get it, doctor. That was when Dr. Julian Sterling walked out. Sterling was in the middle of a conversation with a wealthy donor's wife. He was smiling, holding a cup of organic espresso. When he heard the shouting, his smile vanished. He looked at Elias like he was an uninvited cockroach at a gala. Is there a problem here? Sterling asked. Doctor, please. Elias grabbed Sterling's arm. Mud from Elias's hand stained the sleeve of Sterling's white coat, a coat that cost more than a year of Elias's mortgage. Sterling looked down at the stain. His eyes flared with a cold, white-hot rage. He jerked his arm away as if Elias were infectious. You just ruined a $4,000 custom-tailored coat, Sterling said, his voice trembling with suppressed anger. Beverly, why is this man still in my lobby? He says the boy can't breathe, doctor, Beverly replied, sounding bored. Sterling looked at Leo. The boy was limp in Elias's arms. His eyes were rolled. But to a trained doctor it was an obvious emergency. But Sterling wasn't looking at the boy's vitals. He was looking at the boy's clothes. Saw the dirty kid from the dirty side of town. He's probably having a reaction to the filth he lives in, Sterling said. He didn't even reach for a stethoscope. We don't treat indigent cases here. It's a liability. We have a reputation to maintain for our VIP clients. If I let every person off the street in here, we'd be a homeless shelter in a week. He's dying. Elias screamed. Then take him to the county hospital, Sterling snapped. They love people like security. Get this man out of here. He's contaminating the environment. And send me the bill for the dry cleaning. 2 large men in black suits approached. Elias looked at them, then at Sterling. You're the chief of medicine? Elias asked. It was a whisper now. I am, Sterling said, straightening his tie. And you are nobody. Now leave. Elias Thorne didn't fight the security guards. He didn't have time. Every second was a heartbeat Leo didn't have. He turned and ran back to his truck. But he didn't go to the county hospital. He drove to the side entrance, the service entrance used for oxygen tank deliveries. He knew the code. He had set it himself. He got Leo inside into a service elevator. He bypassed the lobby. He headed straight for the 5th floor. The floor that didn't exist on the public directory. The owner's suite. As the elevator climbed, Elias pulled a small encrypted phone from a hidden pocket in his muddy hoodie. He pressed one button. "This is Thorne," he said into the phone. His voice was no longer that of a desperate father. It was the voice of a man who could erase a career with a sentence. "Code Black at Central. I need Dr. Eris and the chief of surgery in the private theater in 60 seconds. And someone get me a clean pair of scrubs. My son is dying because Julian Sterling wouldn't do his job." The voice on the other end didn't ask questions. "Sir, we're moving." The elevator doors opened. Elias ran. Meanwhile, downstairs, Dr. Julian Sterling was laughing with the donor's wife. "I'm so sorry about that, Mrs. Gable," Sterling said, sounding like a hero. "You can't believe the types we have to deal with sometimes. They think just because they have an emergency they can bypass the rules. It's all about standards, isn't it?" Mrs. Gable smiled. "You're so right, Julian. That's why we support this hospital. It's so clean." Sterling felt powerful. He felt like a god. He didn't know that upstairs his boss was currently watching his son's heart rate stabilize under the care of the best surgeons in the world. And he didn't know that the audit he had ignored was about to become a public execution. In the private theater of the 5th floor, the atmosphere was a universe away from the chaos of the lobby. There was no shouting. There was only the rhythmic hiss of a high-end ventilator and the soft, confident commands of Dr. Eris, the head of thoracic surgery. Elias Thorne stood in the corner. He had stripped off the muddy hoodie. A nurse had handed him a pair of sterile blue scrubs. He stood with his arms crossed, his eyes locked on the monitor. "Saturation is climbing, sir," Dr. Eris said, not looking up from Leo's chest. 88. 95. His lungs were in a complete laryngospasm. "If you had waited another 5 minutes, if you had gone to the county hospital." Eris didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. "He's stable." Elias's voice was like gravel. "He's resting. We've administered the nebulized corticosteroids. He'll be back to helping you in the garden by Tuesday." Eris finally looked up, saw the smudge of mud still on Elias's forehead. He saw the raw, pulsing anger in the man's jaw. "Sir, what happened downstairs? Tria should have caught this in the bay." Elias walked to the window. From the 5th floor he could see the parking lot. He could see his old Ford F-150, currently being towed away by a truck Sterling had pulled. "The triage didn't fail Eris," Elias said. "The soul did." Julian Sterling decided that Leo didn't have the right aesthetic for his emergency room. Eris went pale. Everyone in the hospital knew Sterling. They knew he was the golden boy of the board. They also knew he was a bully who treated the nursing staff like servants. "Sterling is presenting to the board in 20 minutes, Eris whispered. "He's asking for a 10% stake in the group. He thinks he's the reason the donor numbers are up." Elias checked his watch. 1:40 p.m. The board meeting was in the executive suite on the 6th floor. "Eris," Elias said, "watch my son. Don't let anyone in this room except Bill the janitor. He's the only one in this building who remembered his humanity today." Elias walked into the private dressing room attached to the owner's suite. He opened a cedar-lined closet that had been closed for months. Inside were suits that cost more than a mid-sized sedan. He chose a midnight blue charcoal wool suit hand-stitched in Milan. He put on a crisp white shirt. He tied a silk tie with the precision of a man preparing for war. But he didn't put on the $2,000 Italian loafers. He looked at his muddy, salt-stained work boots sitting by the door. He looked at the black Georgia clay still caked in the treads. He put the boots on. He walked out of the suite. He didn't look like a dirty man anymore. He looked like the man who owned the city. And he was carrying a leather folder that contained the one thing Dr. Sterling feared more than death: the truth. The boardroom was a masterpiece of mahogany and hubris. 12 of the most powerful people in Atlanta's medical industry sat around a table that cost $40,000. At the head of the table stood Dr. Julian Sterling. He had changed into a fresh white coat. He was glowing. He was halfway through a PowerPoint presentation titled, Elite Standards, Curating the Patient Experience. Success isn't just about medicine, Sterling was saying, his voice smooth as silk. It's about brand. It's about ensuring that when a donor walks through those doors, they see a world of excellence. We've seen a 15% increase in private donations since I implemented the triage selection protocol. We filter out the high-risk, low-return cases at the door. It keeps our numbers clean. Keeps our floors clean. An older board member, Mrs. Higgins, leaned forward. And what about the Hippocratic Oath, Julian? What about the patients who can't pay? Sterling smiled, the smile of a shark. We refer them to the county. It's about efficiency, Mrs. Higgins. Just today I had to personally escort a vagrant and his child from the lobby. They were covered in mud. A liability. A distraction. By removing them, I saved this hospital from a potential hygiene crisis and preserved the comfort of our VIP donors. The board nodded. Money, after all, talked louder than ethics. And that is why, Sterling continued, I am asking the board to approve my promotion to executive director with a full equity stake. I have proven that I protect the Thorne legacy. Suddenly, the heavy mahogany doors at the back of the room swung open. They didn't just open. They hit the walls with a sound like a gunshot. Sterling didn't even look up. We are in a private meeting. Security remove. Whoever. Sterling's voice died in his throat. Elias Thorne walked into the room. The board members scrambled to their feet. Some of them looked confused. They hadn't seen the shadow owner in a year. But they recognized the power. They recognized the cold, predatory walk. Sterling stood frozen. He looked at the midnight blue suit. He looked at the face he had just called nobody. And then his eyes traveled down. He saw the muddy work boots. He saw the black clay staining the $100,000 Persian rug. Elias. Sterling stammered. I didn't know you were in the city. I was just telling the board about our standards. Elias didn't go to his seat at the head of the table. He walked straight to Sterling. He stood so close that Sterling could see the reflection of his own terror in Elias's eyes. You told the board you protected my legacy, Julian, Elias said. His voice was low, but it carried to every corner of the room. Is that what you call it? I don't understand, Sterling said, his sweat beginning to soak through his expensive shirt. Elias turned to the board. An hour ago, a boy came into this hospital. He was 8 years old. He was in full respiratory arrest. His oxygen levels were at 82%. He was dying. Elias looked back at Sterling. This man, the man you want to make executive director, looked at that boy and didn't see a patient. He saw mud. Soot. Liability. He told the father to take the dying child 6 miles away to a clinic because he didn't want to ruin the aesthetic of the lobby. The room went deathly silent. Mrs. Higgins covered her mouth with her hand. Julian, Elias said, leaning in. Do you know why I wear these boots? Sterling couldn't speak. His mouth was as dry as bone. I wear them because I grew up in the dirt, Elias said. My mother cleaned the floors you walk on. She taught me that the dirt on a man's hands can be washed. But the dirt on a man's soul? That stays. Elias opened the leather folder. He tossed a single sheet of paper onto the table. That's the medical report from the 5th floor, Elias said. The boy is stable. His name is Leo. Leo Thorne. The sound of 12 breaths being caught at once filled the room. Sterling's face went from pale to a ghostly, translucent white. He leaned against the podium for support. Elias. I had no idea, Sterling whispered. If I had known he was your son, I would have. And that, Elias interrupted, is why you will never practice medicine in this state again. If you only treat a child when you know his father is a billionaire, you aren't a doctor. You're a salesman. And your product is garbage. The fallout was legendary. Elias Thorne didn't just fire Julian Sterling. He dismantled him. By 4 p.m. Sterling's access to the hospital was revoked. By 5 p.m. a team of forensic accountants acting on the audit Elias had initiated found that Sterling had been taking kickbacks from a medical supply company in exchange for overcharging uninsured patients. The standards he bragged about were a front for a multi-million-dollar fraud. 2 weeks later, the headlines hit the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Medical star stripped of license. The secret life of Julian Sterling. The $5 million Buckhead condo? Foreclosed. The Patek Philippe watch? Sold at a court-ordered auction to pay back the patients he had defrauded. The most eligible billionaire was now a man who couldn't get a job as a pharmaceutical sales rep. 1 month after the incident, Leo was back in the backyard of their modest house. He was healthy, his lungs clear, and he was once again knee-deep in a project with his father. But things at the hospital had changed. The VIP triage protocol was abolished. In its place, Elias installed a new statue in the lobby. It wasn't a bust of a founder or a plaque for a donor. It was a bronze statue of a pair of muddy work boots. At the base, the inscription read, "Every life is a legacy. Treat the man, not the suit." Elias Thorne continued to drive his old Ford F-150. He continued to wear his old hoodies. And every Saturday he and Leo would go to the hospital. Not to sit in the boardroom, but to sit in the cafeteria with Bill the janitor eating lunch. And listening to the stories of the people who actually kept the world running. Because Elias Thorne knew a secret that Dr. Sterling never learned. Your value doesn't come from the title on your door or the zeros in your bank. It comes from the way you look at a dirty boy in a moment of crisis. And see a human being worthy of a miracle. Dr. Sterling thought he was the king of the mountain. He thought he could decide who lived and who died based on the shine of their shoes. He forgot that the mountain belongs to the man who isn't afraid to get his boots dirty. If this story moved you, if you believe that every person deserves respect, regardless of their status, then do me a favor. Hit that like button. It helps us spread these lessons to more people who need to hear them. And if you haven't yet, join our family by hitting subscribe. We have hundreds of stories like this in our archive. Stories where the truth always comes to light and the payback is always legendary. Check out the video on your screen right now for another story of a hidden billionaire who was pushed too far. And remember, never judge a book by its cover, because you never know who is writing the final chapter. This is Modernist Africa Folktale. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next.